went in and cut it, and the rest is the rest.
I want to quote you from the book here and ask you something about this. Late in the book you say, even with a relatively modest success in financial security I graduated to, my life is now very different from the lives of those I've chosen to write about. This worried me. What's it been like as a songwriter to be, you write so much in character, and so many of those characters are people who lead kind of regular blue-collar lives. Has it been a challenge to continue, I mean, that's who you are and that's where you come from, but has that been a challenge to talk about here with success to kind of keep a grasp on that?
I get asked this question a lot, and this is kind of an interesting question, because, I mean, all writers know that writing is an act of the imagination, primarily. And people generally don't ask Martin Scorsese, say, why he still isn't in the mafia. Writing about the mafia, not being in the mafia. And so, but it is something that, in my case, I drew a lot from my early life. I drew a lot from my father's experience and from my experience I had through him and through my mother. The places you've been never leave you, particularly the formative places. That's why you have Howard Hughes naked in a chair at 60 years old saving Kleenexes. Which I hope I don't end up at. But those are the things that imprinted you when you were young, that even if you strive extremely hard to dismiss or get away from them, I don't believe you can. I didn't have the desire to do that, or maybe a part of me did, but a part of me had a very strong desire to retain those connections. It was a way that I felt I honored my family, which was very important to me. It was a way that I felt I honored my father's experience, my mother's experience, the people that I knew, and that was something, telling that story was very, very, very important to me. I'm not sure why. I suppose it must have helped me make sense of myself in some way. It gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of, drove me, a sense of pride, and it felt like writers write stories that they feel need to be told, whatever it is, and even as your life changes and mutates, these are things that just simply continue to travel with me, and I just always called on them when I needed them. They were the subjects that interested me. That's what you write about. You write about what interests you. What interested me was, what was this life all about? How did this happen? What did it mean? What were the social forces at play on my parents' lives? What were the psychological forces at play on my parents' lives, on my life when I was young? I don't understand these things, and all I know is they bother me. They bother me greatly. It's just a mystery I'm interested in plumbing, so I continue on,
There's been a lot of press about, in the book you discuss your battle with depression and your treatment with depression, and you talk about it as much or as little as you want to. But there's one thing in particular I wanted to ask you about, which was something your wife Patty said recently in an article, that was the part of the book that she was, least comfortable with, but she knew that you writing about it was sort of your way of working through things, both with songs and now with this book. And she said a lot of his work comes from him trying to overcome that part of himself.
I'm sorry, a lot of people.
A lot of his work comes from him trying to overcome that part of himself.
Yeah, I suppose that was true. I think, music was the way that I medicated myself from the beginning. It was the first thing that centered me and chased away the blues. It was a way that I made sense of my experience. So it was the thing that, even the length of the shows, I found out that exhaustion was my friend. Because if I got myself tired enough, I was simply too tired to be depressed. I mean, your mind doesn't have the energy to go searching in the weeds for the stupid thing today that you're going to be able to drive yourself crazy with. And so I found that the experience of playing cleared my mind and gave me a brief moment of respite from the things that tended to disturb me. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that because, my family had a long history of mental illness, and on the Irish side particularly, but some of the Italians too. And it just picked people off here and there, and I got a piece of it, and it's been just something I've dealt with, but felt like I really went into it mainly because felt I needed to be fair towards my father, who I felt I painted rather one-dimensionally in my songs. At the end of the day, I said, well, now that our relationship is a lot more complicated, and I needed to flush that out so people understood a little bit more about him and our lives together. And so that's kind of how I came around writing about it.
And the book with 79 short chapters, it often feel like a collection of songs. How was the process of writing the book similar to or different from writing songs?
I couldn't say it was easier, but the similarities were, like I said, you still have to find music in your prose, you have to find a rhythm in your prose, you have to find a narrative that pushes your story forward. You got to be careful with things that kind of stop you dead in your tracks. It allowed you to flush things out with a lot more detail. It's obviously more directly about you personally. I mean, I could point to any song and someone would say, hey, that song's about you. It may be, it may have nothing to do with you whatsoever. When you're writing a book like this, that it's about you. It's like autobiography. So you can't get away from that, so you might as well forget about that. So that kind of frees you, and it's not a book where you're writing in character. I mean, you are making choices about what you choose to write about, what parts of your life, but in the end of the day, it's you're telling your story. It was just something different from songwriting. It was enjoyable.
What was your process like? You wrote it over 7 years.
Yeah, that sounds like I did a lot more work than I did. I'd write for a while, then I would stop and put it away for long periods of time. And then I'd come back to it and I'd read a bit of what I'd written. I had a pretty basic approach. I wrote everything out longhand. And then I would dictate it to my assistant who would put it in the computer. And then I'd print it out and I'd edit it and rewrite it.